Hi, you're welcome to Lawyers Infohub. It's always a pleasure to have you here. For my returning subscribers, I really appreciate you. I thank you for always checking up on what is new on the channel. And for you who's watching me for the first time, this is Lawyers Infohub. It's a platform where we talk about law in a more simplified way. We also invite people to share their thoughts on legal issues. You're welcome. And today we're looking at shares, types of shares, company shares. Yes. So, what is a share? A share is the interest of a shareholder in a company. The interest of a shareholder in a company, which is measured by sum of money for the purposes of liability in the first place and of interest in the second place. It consists of series of mutual covenants entered into by all shareholders with respect to the memo and articles of the company. A shareholder is a part owner of a company, but it does not own the company's assets. So when you hear of someone say that I'm a shareholder in this company, it means that the person has shares in that company. Shares are derived from the share capital, which is what the company uses to, you know, raise or further its objects. The company always have its objects, what it intends to do. So the shares are what the company is authorized to use to in furtherance of its what objects. And when an investor subscribes to the shares of the company, it is a subscription to a part of the capital of the enterprise. So when a shareholder subscribes to the company, he's subscribing to what be able to partake of the capital of the what enterprise. You know, the capital is always divided into units of shares what for subscription. And once a shareholder has subscribed to the shares of the company, he becomes a part owner of the what company. But just like I earlier said, he does not own assets of the company. He does not own assets of the company. Now we're looking at the types of shares that we have, the classes of shares. We call them classes of shares or types of shares for ease of understanding. The classes of shares we have. We have several classes of shares. Um, Now, why shares are arranged in classes is that the group or the class of shares they enjoy identical rights and what privileges that accrue to the members of the company. I know these rights are usually with respect to the dividend, return of capital, voting rights, um, which are shared pari passu by all holders of shares of a company or the class of that shares. So we have what we call the ordinary shares. The ordinary shares usually carry all the residual rights in the company, which have not been conferred on other classes of shares. When a shareholder, has shares that are ordinary shares, they are entitled to dividend only after other shareholders with preference rights have been paid their dividend. So, for a shareholder who has ordinary shares, he will receive his dividends after those who have preference shares have collected theirs. They carry all the residual rights. And when you mean residual, remainder, yes. So an ordinary shareholder, they're not entitled to return on capital until the preferred shareholders have been paid their capital in full. So for someone who has the ordinary share capital, you receive your dividend after the other classes of shares have received their dividend, and you do not have issues of you're not entitled to return of capital. Yes, so it's only after the other classes of shares have been paid their dividends that you are being paid. Now, ordinary shares, they also carry the greatest risks of the company. They carry the greatest risks of a company. So you need to understand the nature, the nature of what ordinary shares, the class of ordinary shares represent. They carry the greatest risks if the company, you know, if the company's undertaking proves unsuccessful. So if the company's business or whatever they are involved in is unsuccessful, is it those shareholders of the class of ordinary or the ordinary shareholders, they carry the greatest risks. They also carry the greatest advantage of financial gain if it proves successful. Because after the preference shareholders have been paid, you know, the ordinary shareholders also will be paid. They are also entitled to the balance of distributable profit, balance of profitable business of profit after every other class have been settled. In the literal parlance of the or in a normal expression, you say they are entitled to the bottom pot profit. Yes. So they are entitled to the balance of distributed profits, which may even be more than what the preference holders get, unless the preference shares are participating. You have to get that point. Sometimes because the balance of distributable profits, by the time they share to the ordinary shareholders, they might even get more than what the preference shareholders are getting. It depends on circumstance, not all the time. Sometimes those are in the preference class, the shares are maybe participating shares. Now, doing winding up, after the preference shareholders with priority have been repaid their capital, the ordinary shareholders will get the surplus. They will take the surplus assets, which may also be more than the nominal value of their shares. So it is ordinary, but they also have the advantages and they also have their disadvantages. Now, the bulk of the voting power in a company rests on the ordinary shareholders. So the ordinary shareholders can help monitor and control the management of the company. You know, so it's also important that you note all this. So as much as it's ordinary shares, it does not mean they are not with advantages. Now we have the preference shares. The preference shares. The main characteristics, as the name implies, that they confer a certain level of preference on its holders, in respect of dividend, return of capital, or both. A holder of a preference share is entitled to dividend of a fixed amount. They already have a fixed amount. The ordinary shareholder is after the preference have been paid. They're not entitled to the distributable profit, the balance of it. So even all these people have been paid, whatever is remaining is what they will now be shared. But for a preference shareholder, you have a fixed amount of dividend you are going to get it. Now, that fixed amount is usually expressed in terms of percentage of the nominal value of the share. So they have an upper hand. They take theirs before the ordinary shareholder takes. Now, it is also important that a preference shareholder is only entitled to a dividend if it is earned. The dividend must be what? Earned. If the company has no profit, the preferential or the preference shareholder gets nothing. So the dividends of the preference shareholder is based on the profits of the company. Now, the preference shares may come in various forms. It may be provided that the preference share shall confer on the holder a right to a fixed preferential dividend expressed as a percentage of a nominal share. What it means is that, as I said, the preference shares come in various forms. So it might be that for this particular shareholder or this particular class of shares, we already have a fixed preferential dividend that is expressed in percentage of a nominal value of shares. Also, in a preference shareholder may be given a preference in terms of repayment of capital and a right to participate in the surplus asset after all other shareholders have been paid. So, preferential or the preference shareholder can also come in another form of they are, there's preference, they're giving preference in the repayment of their capital, or they have a right to participate in the surplus assets after every other shareholder have been paid. This is what we call the participating preference. And also they form part of the equity share capital of the company. So so there are various forms under which preference shares they come up. Now, a company can also issue what we call the convertible preference shares, which at the option of the shareholder may be converted to ordinary shares. So the company also can, issue what we call the convertible, which the shareholder might say, okay, just convert it to the ordinary shares. So the quantum of special rights that is attached to preference share attract the patronage of those investors who do not fancy subscribing to risk capital, but are more interested in what a stable fixed yield from the investment. So what he's trying to say is that the special rights that is attached to preference shares is what makes investors, rush it. Because the investors know that at the end of the month, at the end of the fixed term, I am getting so profit. They don't want to put in their money in a business that might be risks. At the end of the day, they're telling stories, nothing came out, they had a loss. So for the preference share, they are sure that if you're putting in A, you're going to get B. So they are sure of what is coming up as a return on investment. So that special right is what attracts investors to this type of what shares, because there is a stable fixed yield from your investment. There's no story of we didn't make it, we had lost and all of that. Now, it's also very important to say that preference shares prove useful for those companies who wish to raise further capital without risking a loss of control by existing ordinary shareholders. Companies that want to raise further capital, without losing the existing control of the ordinary shareholders, they might, choose to go on issuing preference shares. Just like I earlier mentioned, that the control and management of a company rests on the ordinary shareholders, but they bear the burden. They bear the crunch. They bear the burden of failure. They bear the burden of success. So you will have to in a newcomer we have look out for section 138, 140, 140 sub 1. It makes provisions, it gives you understanding of all I'm talking about. So we're going to look at another class of share. Yeah, we're going to look at another class of shares for you to understand. We have the redeemable preference shares. That's under section 147 sub 2 of the CAM of 2020. We say a company that is limited by share may, if authorized by its articles, issue preference shares which shall, at the option of the company, be liable to be redeemed. This is called redeemable preference share. Now, the power of redemption, is subject to section 182 of the CAMA, that the shares shall not be redeemed unless they are fully paid, and redemption shall be made only out of profits of the company, which would otherwise be available for dividends, and the proceeds of a fresh issue of shares made for the purposes of redemption. Then before the shares are redeemed, the premium, if any, payable on redemption shall be provided for out of profit of the company or out of the company premium account. See, this type of shares is what at the option of at the instance of the company is liable to be redeemed. And to redeem this type of shares, it is subject to certain provisions of the CAMA. It says that the shares shall not be redeemed unless they are fully paid. The shares must be fully paid before they can be redeemable. And the redemption is only can be made out of the profit of the company, which will otherwise be available for a dividend. So you must understand these classes of shares. If you're going to be a shareholder of a company, you must know, am I entitled to the ordinary shares? Am I entitled to the preference shares? Am I entitled to the redeemable preference shares? I must be able to understand what each one, states. The redemption of preference shares, under Section 147 sub 2 shall not be taken reducing the company authorized share capital. What he's trying to say is that the fact that the shares are redeemable, you know, it shall not be taken to reduce the company authorized share capital. There are certain share capital that must be for a certain level of companies in terms of what the nature of the company. Some company can do 1 million share capital, while others have a benchmark. So they're saying the fact that these shares are redeemable should not affect the authorized share capital of the company. So these are the works of the managers of the company to ensure that, those in control, to ensure that no matter what we are doing, this preference share should not reduce the amount of authorized share capital. We have the founders of deferred shares. Deferred shares usually rank in priority to ordinary shares. They may entitle the holder to the whole or a proportion of the profit after the ordinary shares have been paid a fixed dividend. So we have the founders or deferred shares. The founders, they are founders of a company, those who come together to say, okay, let us incorporate this company. We call them the founders, So they have what we call the founder shares or the deferred shares, and they rank in priority to the ordinary shares. These shares are usually subscribed for by the promoters and vendors. Yes, those people that started the company can use these shares to give as compensation to say, okay, for those who have put together, a lot of people have put together maybe money, have put together time, have put together ideas to form, incorporate the company. It's okay, we're going to allot you so founder shares. It works. So we also have what we call the class rights. The class rights, and also what we call the variation of class rights. So when a company have these various classes of shares and special rights are attached to them either by memorandum of articles or memorandum or articles of the association, the question, these rights be varied? Can it be varied? So this will be what we'll discuss in another class on variation of class rights. So today we just look at what is a share. When someone says I'm a company shareholder, what is he saying? And does he even understand the classes of shares we have? Prevention, you have to write an opinion. You have met a client who's telling you about, I'm a shareholder of this company. I don't even understand the workings of the company. You should understand what type of shareholder are you? Are you an ordinary shareholder? Are you a preference a shareholder with the preference shares? Or we have uh, the founder shares too, that we also have earlier talked about. We talked about the distinctive factors to, the distinctive um, factors that will make you, that will differentiate one from the other. So we just hope we also talked about, yes, class rights, but we're talking about that we are going to look at variation of class rights on another class. So friends, corporate practice is a very deep area of law, and for those who want to work in companies in-house, you must understand all these details of shares, allotment of shares, and all of that. We also have redeemable preference shares. We looked at it, what it's all about, what makes it redeemable, when can you redeem. You must ensure that even in redeeming your shares, the share capital of the company should not reduce. Please, if you have any question on the issue of shares and the classes of shares, drop it in the comment section. We will attend to it. For those who are yet to subscribe to the channel, please do hit the subscribe button. We have wonderful videos on different subjects in the channel, which will encourage you to also look at for your own growth and for your own for you to also understand what a lot of things we've to discuss for another view, for you to have another view. It's possible you know it, but hearing it from another person will give you another clearer view of what you already know or what you don't even know. So, friends, I just hope you enjoyed today's class. Do take care of yourself, and bye for now.